guys, welcome to my March wrap-up. I read a lot this month. I read 8 books, so I'm not going to blabber on. Let's get right into it. The first book that I read, I mostly read in February. I think I had less than 50 pages to read in March, which contributes to the high amount of books I read this month, but that book was If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. We follow a young black girl who is from Harlem, and the book opens with her explaining that her boyfriend is in prison. We're basically shifting from the present to the past with exploring their love story, Fonnie and Tish's love story, and then seeing how Tish is trying to navigate Fonnie being in prison. And so in many ways this is a criticism of the American criminal justice system and how racist it was and still is. James Baldwin's writing is absolutely incredible, and I really enjoyed this book. I was really pleasantly surprised with how he wrote Tish's character because it is under her point of view, and sometimes men don't really write women's point of views very well and vice versa, to be honest, but I found that this one was really well done. I underlined a lot of the parts and I really loved the beginning, and I overall really enjoyed what he was criticizing and, pointing out the brutality of carceral system. This was also very reminiscent of my undergraduate degree because I did do criminology, and a big part of my interest in criminology was looking at how injustice exists within the justice system. And although my degree was in Canada, there are a lot of parallels with the United States. I think if I hadn't been in that degree, maybe this book would have hit harder, but because I've read cases like this one a lot of times, the shock value wasn't there, but I really appreciated how realistic it was painted, and that is really devastating. This book was written in the 1970s and is still relevant today, so highly recommend If Beale Street Could Talk. After that, I read my favorite book of the month, and that was Educated by Tara Westover. I'd heard about this book. You've probably heard about this book before as well, and personally I never had an interest reading it before, even though I am now pursuing a degree in education. But my roommate loves this book and she bought it for me and was really excited for me to read it, so I went in with that expectation, and this book really blew me away. What I thought this book was about was following her journey with education and, just a girl talking about education. And while that is true, I think this book is mostly just her story trying to escape from the radicalism of her family. She comes from a radicalist Mormon family, and this talks about her journey with education. But I think there are so many more dynamics that come at play, and I can't explain them. But if you've never considered reading this book, I would still highly recommend it because it's really shocking but interesting, and she's very self-aware of what she gained from education and what she lost from education, and I think that made me appreciate it all the more because it was very nuanced. I guarantee that you will be shocked. Reading this book, you will be really surprised by the writing, which I've thought was really great. So please, if you're going to take one recommendation from this video, let it be Educated. After Educated, I read Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. I waited a year for the paperback to come out. This is the American cover because I prefer it to the English cover. And I'd started this book last year in February. I remember I read about 10% and was really loving it. That's why I wanted to buy the book. And when I'd started reading this book, I wasn't very much into classics and I didn't read them so much, or as much as I have since. And in a way, that was a disservice to this book because this book is basically a reimagining of Carmilla, which is the first Gothic vampire story, and it was sapphic. Back then, from what I know, it was written to criticize lesbians, and this author obviously doesn't wish to do that. It's not a warning against lesbianism. But yes, I was gonna say reading classics recently has done this book a disservice because it is set obviously in the past, and the writing kind of clashed with the setting for me. The writing felt very modern and it just really threw me away. But that's not really what bothered me most with this book. I think unfortunately I just did not connect with the main character at all, and so a lot of the book is her expressing her complaints that are in some ways valid, but because I didn't connect with her, I just got really fed up with that aspect, and it was also very slow and it could have just done more in many areas. I think it was treading the surface, but it could have gone deeper. So that was Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. After this, I tried reading Promise Me Sunshine by Caraba Stone, and I think I got about maybe 25% before I decided to DNF this book. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'll just quickly explain the reason why I DNF'd it. I was actually enjoying the main male character. It was very clear that what happens in the beginning is a misunderstanding on his part, and although at first I was a bit dubious with him, he started to grow on me. However, our main female character, I found her very cringy, and because of that, when it talked about her grieving her best friend, it felt a bit trivial to me because I found her personality very cringy, and I didn't connect to this book as much as I heard other people have and as much as I wished I would, and I knew that if I continued, it was just going to turn into me hating the latter half, so I decided not to continue it. But despite all this, I would be curious to read her newest release called No Matter What, because I love a second chance romance, and yeah, I would be up to giving her a second chance as well. So that was Promise Me Sunshine. Clearly I was in the mood for a romance, and so I decided to do what I did last year when I read my first romance book of the year last year, and what I did was to read the books from the Rome, Kentucky series by Sarah Adams. So I read In Your Dreams, which was the last book in this little interconnected romance series, and this one follows our last sister, Madison, who is a chef in New York. The book opens with her being really unhappy there, and she gets an opportunity to become a chef back in Rome, Kentucky, where she is going to have a little affair with her brother's best friend. It doesn't go into the cliche of the brother's best friend trope at all, which I really appreciated actually. And the brother's best friend, James, has clearly been pining for her very obviously in the last books in that series, so it was nice to read this finally. But I did expect there to be a bit more yearning with the setup for their romance in the other books and how infatuated with her he was. I expected there to be a little bit more, but I enjoyed this book overall. I thought it was a good romance. Quick to read, not a favorite, probably my least favorite in the whole series. I don't really know why actually, but I think my favorite was the one before, Beg, Borrow, or Steal. So I think my expectations for this one were higher because I love Beg, Borrow, or Steal, but I still enjoyed it, and it was very bittersweet to say goodbye to this whole world. I really loved the small town. I loved the characters, especially the side characters. I thought the dynamics with everyone within the small town were really nice. So it was a bittersweet goodbye, but really happy that I finished this interconnected series. The next two books I read in my last video, so I invite you to watch that if you're curious to hear more thoughts as I was reading these books. The first one is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I'm going to be very vague with the summary, but the book opens with something pretty tragic, and we are told this event, and Frederick Bachman then says this is the story of how we got there. And so we kind of go back a few months, weeks before that event happens to understand the dynamics within this town called Beartown. Beartown is very big on hockey, and they are counting on their junior team to bring economy back into their town, because they know that if the junior team wins their semi-final and then the final in their little tournament, the press is going to come back, people are going to want to move here. They're just really, really counting on this junior hockey team. And we follow a myriad of characters, from the coaches, the manager of the hockey team, the boys in the hockey team, the wives of the men who work in this hockey team, daughter of some characters, and this was a really brilliant book. I think the build up to it was a bit slow, which is why if I were to be very critical of it, it's not my favorite book of the month, but I really loved it overall, because after chapter 21 there's a little bit of a shift and it starts going a little bit faster, and I really loved his writing. I really loved the subject matter, got very much attached to the characters and the story. I just felt very engrossed in it overall, and I'm really happy that I finally picked this book up. So that was Beartown. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Although I don't really say this in my videos, but if you have trigger warnings, I invite you to check them out. After that, I read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and basically we follow the Riva family, we follow all the children. There's 2 daughters and 2 sons, and the book, in a similar way to Beartown, opens with this crazy tragic event that is going to happen at the end of a party, and then it is basically divided into 2 parts. We follow the 12 hours before the party and the 12 hours during the party. The party is thrown by the oldest sibling, Nina, who throws this party at the end of summer, every summer in August, to celebrate the end of summer, and it is a party attended by a lot of celebrities. In the 7 hours leading up to the party, we are under the point of views of the children, and we also flash back to their parents' meeting and the kids' upbringing, so we really come to understand their dynamics with each other and why they act with each other the way they do. And then the hours of the party, we still follow the siblings, but we also follow characters who are attending the party. I really liked the first half of this book. I found the dynamics of the siblings interesting. I found following the parents really fun. I just really enjoyed the build-up. However, it kind of lost me on the second half because I didn't care about a lot of the point of views that we were getting. I don't think they necessarily served a purpose. There's really only one point of view that I thought was useful, or 2. Maybe. But the rest of them, I thought they just slowed the pace down and that they genuinely weren't needed, and I don't really understand why we got them. So that was an interesting thing to see. But overall, I think it's a pretty good book for summer. And like I said in my video, I think this book would translate very well as a TV show or a film. So that was Malibu Rising. Then I read my least favorite book of the month, and that was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I went to this with high expectations, not really high, but still high because it's described as a book that everyone will love. Even if you don't love sci-fi, you will love this book. Obviously read it because a movie came out and I was interested in watching the movie, and I have this really loose rule for myself that if I am interested in watching a movie that is an adaptation of a book, I should probably read the book. However, I'm really not a sci-fi person, whether in film or books, but I do adhere to it more in films than books, and I still didn't really like this one. It was described as very funny and emotional, but for me, it wasn't either. It was funnier than emotional, but it wasn't necessarily super funny. I thought the jokes were very obvious, so it wasn't that funny. I was also very much bothered by the cliches in this book. It felt like the characters that weren't the main character were written in a very one-dimensional way. They felt like caricatures, which I did not enjoy, and it gave this book a very subtle sexist undertone. It was not overtly sexist in any way. It just felt like, I don't know how to explain it, and it might just be how I felt with the book, but that was a bit annoying. And then most of what I disliked actually was how scientific it was. I appreciated it at first because it makes the whole thing seem plausible, but after a while I just was so checked out and it made the pace really slow. I stopped connecting to the main character very quickly. I stopped connecting to the story, and by the end I just wanted it to be over. Thankfully, everyone recommends the audiobook when reading Project Hail Mary, and I completely understand why, because the narrator does a really great job. And if it hadn't been for the audiobook, I would have DNF'd it, and I should have DNF'd it, to be honest, because I didn't enjoy it. I had 4 hours of listening left. Usually if I have 4 hours of reading, I split that into 2, because for me, when I read an audiobook, I'm still sitting with the book in front of my eyes, because otherwise I get distracted. But for this book, A, I listened to those 4 hours in one day because I needed it to be over, and B, at a certain point I stopped sitting in front of the book because I just wanted it to be over. So to be completely transparent, I was a bit less focused in the end of the book, not with the big things, but like with details. But amidst all of this, I am still really excited to go see the movie. We're going to see the movie with my brother in 2 days, so really excited to see that and to see what I think, because it's rated so highly on Letterboxd. From when I checked yesterday, it was at a 4.4 average and 1.2 million people having seen it. And to give a comparison, Hamnet was at 1.4 million people having seen it and an average of 4.2. So Project Hail Mary is rated really high, and I'm curious to see what I will think about it. But yes, those were my thoughts on Project Hail Mary. Really unfortunate, and it almost put me in a reading slump because the day after I finished it, I did not read until I read the first page of a book, which I didn't end up continuing, so I'm not even going to mention that book. I only read the first 2 pages of that book because it was the first chapter, and I have my streak on Fable and I don't want to lose my streak, and I do read every day, but I was so tired when I was reading this. So anyway, last book that I read was In the Margins by Elena Ferrante. I finished this book today, actually. Today is the 30th. This is basically a transcript of a lecture that she was giving on her relationship to reading and writing. Obviously, she did not give this lecture out loud. If you don't know, Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym and no one knows who this brilliant writer is. So this was given by proxy. It's split into 4 sections of this whole lecture, and she goes into, like I was saying, her relationship to writing and how that was influenced by her reading. She talks about her approach to writing and what she was trying to do with some of her books. She also talks about writing as a woman, which is really interesting. And this was a reread for me, but I knew that I was going to reread this book because when I finished the Neapolitan Quartet, which you can kind of see up there, I knew I would want to reread this and get a little bit more of a glimpse into what she meant with this, having read the Neapolitan Quartet. And I think I will continue to return to this book. It was annotated, and I think it's really interesting because I ended up annotating a bit more, and that's always really interesting to see how just a period in your life makes the relationship you have with a book a bit different. So that was In the Margins, and those were all the books I read this month. I am really excited for next month's reading, and I'll see you next week. Bye guys.